What's up, Thrashers, and welcome back once again to the Thrash Maniac 99 YouTube channel, and I am back with yet another album review, and kicking off yet another weekend of underground releases, as I'm talking about the latest offering from Beheaded, GHADAM. This came out on July 25th, this time on Agonia Records, and this is the band's 7th studio full-length overall, and for those who don't know, this is a Malta-based brutal death metal band, and the first time I ever heard about this band was actually, about a year ago when I was watching the Cannibal Corpse Global Evisceration documentary, and Cannibal Corpse were talking about playing in Malta for the first time and meeting the guys from Beheaded, and that's how I first heard about them, but I never listened to anything of theirs until this album. And while they're described as brutal death metal, on the archives at least, I would say this album's kind of going for more of like atmospheric and dissonant death metal, even a little blackened death metal, I would argue. Like, there are a couple of brutal moments, but it's not like on the level of a band like Suffocation or Dying Fetus or even Cannibal Corpse. I would say a good chunk of this album is mostly inspired by bands like Morbid Angel, Ulcerate, maybe a little bit of Nile, Immolation here and there, I would say. Like, it's mostly centered around like a lot of dissonance and like atonal melodies, nasty, like, evil tremolos that do kind of border on blackened death metal. Hell, I would also say a great band to compare this album to would be Soul for Aeon. Like, there are some Soul for Aeon moments that pop up quite a lot on this album. And we kick things off with the title track. Starts off with this wonderful acoustic guitar before it gets into brutal, dissonant riffs and blast beats that very much harken back to Morbid Angel, but you get some really nice groove, there's some thrashy tempo shifts here, and of course, tremolos galore, whether they be on the death metal side or even a little bit leaning towards black metal. Now, I gotta mention the lead work on this album, which there weren't very many leads to be found, but when the leads did show up, they were pretty tasty. Like, they perfectly complemented the songs very well. But you do get some brutal chug at the end of the title track here to kind of say, like, hey, we haven't completely abandoned our brutal death roots, even though it sounds like with this album they're evolving their sound away from standard brutal death metal and more towards, like I said, blackened death metal or even like avant-garde death metal. But then we get into the rest of the songs, which I'm not going to attempt to pronounce these because they're all in Maltan language, and I'm not going to get any of them right, so I'm just not even going to bother pronouncing these titles. But like track number 2, there are more of those Morbid Angel moments, but dare I say, a little more melody starts coming in here. Like, there are some cool, like, melodic pockets that show up here, but you do get some Suffocation riffs here and there on this track, and I'm talking, like, maybe the last Suffocation album. Like, there's a little bit of that heft behind some of the riffs on here, but, of course, atonal riffs start coming in big time, and, of course, dissonant melodies. Hell, it almost gets borderline symphonic with how atmospheric it gets. And then on track 3, I love how it starts off with this like compare and contrast between like atonal tremolos and chugs going together before it gets into those like more Soul for Aeon kind of dissonant melodies. Triplet rhythms, which first time on the album thus far, you get like triplet patterns. Hell, even some like dark, clean vocals that again remind me of the frontman of Soul for Aeon's clean vocals whenever they pop up. And of course, like more of those like blackened tremolos show up. Excuse me. And then track number 4, it actually kind of starts off a little different with like a marching snare and more melody. Like more melody coming along as opposed to like, let's just get down to the heft and the heaviness. Let's start off with a little bit more of a melodic start to kind of build up the mood. And this, as well as track number 8, those two songs, even track 6, all do incorporate a little bit of doom. Like there's some like doomy riffs and moments that kind of feel like impending doom is upon you. But with track 4, lots of killer double bass work. And it even gets a little bit thrashy again. And then track 5, you do get some like brutal triplet chugs, but the atmosphere turns quite eerie, and there's even some chants. Hell, it even ends with piano play. Track 6. This one definitely goes for the most morbid angel worship out there. Like, this is morbid angel worship galore. Hell, you could even compare it to a band that also worships the altars of madness of morbid angel, and that's Britain's Mithras. Like, there's some Mithras moments that kind of get sprinkled in here, I would say. Track 7, probably the most aggressive and energetic song on here, because it's mostly like thrashy death metal riffs, not so much about atmosphere, melody, or even like the blackened parts. This one just goes for more like a thrashy old school death metal vibe. There's some groove going on, even a shredding lead. And then track 8 kind of touches on almost everything that this album offers. Like, it starts off rather sinister. There's some thrashy bits, it's evil riffs, doom and dissonance, like basically just everything about this album condensed into one track. And then track 9, it was an acoustic outro, but it was actually pretty. It was actually a pretty way to end this strange, dark album right here. So, songwriting wise, I actually thought this was pretty impressive, even though not what I was expecting. Like, I was expecting something along the lines of Suffocation, Dying Fetus, Deeds of Flesh, Cannibal Corpse, whereas here I get more nods of like Sulphur Aeon, Morbid Angel, Mithras, Ulcerate, a little bit of Nile. So it's kind of going for more cerebral atmosphere, I would say, on this album. And really, the only thing I have to complain about, and it is kind of a big issue, the mix of the drums is super muddy and thin. Like, there are times where it almost sounds like the snare just completely disappears. But aside from that gripe, songs were awesome. I'm going to give this a 4 out of 5. I would say if the mix was better, I would have gone up to a 4.5, but this is some wild atmospheric death metal from a band that has its roots in more brutal death metal, but evolving, it seems, and creating something different. So in this case, if you love Morbid Angel, Sulphur Aeon, Nile, Mithras, and Ulcerate, check this out. But of course, those are just my opinions. What did you guys think? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. But until next time, thank you for watching, keep your horns high, and your dreams wet.